Sadhana. We are Jen and Ramtin from Heart Center Revolution.
Our intention with this podcast is to share the best of Kundalini yoga and conscious living with you so you can live a more heart-centered life. Satnam Revolutionaries, and welcome back to episode 48 of the Heart Centered Revolution podcast. I'm so excited to be back with you today. It is just going to be a solo Jen episode today. We were having some scheduling difficulties, and so I really wanted to get this episode out to you. So it'll just be me. But today we're going to talk about sadhana. So the word sadhana is spelled S-A-D-H-A-N-A most often. And in general, it's a spiritual practice, but within the Kundalini yoga community, there's actually 3 different ways the word is used. And I think it can get pretty confusing. And depending on where you're at in your life cycles and your spiritual journey, you might need one type of sadhana versus another type of sadhana. So today we're going to talk about all 3 types of sadhana and when you might need each kind, and kind of what that looks like for you. I'll also be sharing some of examples from my life of different times when I've done each types of these sadhanas. And then at the end, we have a really great pranayam meditation. This is like a full meditation, not in length. We'll still do 3 minutes, but this is a meditation to boost energy and release stress using the breath. It's a really amazing one. So I hope you stick around till the end. As usual, if you enjoy this podcast, please hit subscribe or follow wherever you're listening to podcasts to make sure that you are aware when we drop our next episode. All right, so let's jump into the conversation about sadhana. So sadhana is, again, used a lot in Kundalini yoga communities, and it can use 3 different things. But essentially what it translates to is your daily spiritual practice. And this is the cornerstone of a Kundalini yoga practice. And so most beginners will go to a class, right? Once a week, a couple times a week, maybe once a month. And that feels good while you're there. And the effects might last for a few hours, for a day. You might really feel those benefits. But if you truly want Kundalini yoga to transform your life, there needs to be a consistency. And this is true of any spiritual practice. If you want a transformation for your life and you feel drawn to using Kundalini yoga or mindfulness or connecting with nature, any of these spiritual practices, connecting with angels, consistency most often is key. You know, if you go to like a formal meditation, sometimes there's these longer meditations that you can do. You can go practice for 62 minutes or 2.5 hours, and it can be a wonderful experience, or even white tantric within the Kundalini yoga world, which is, a 6-hour really deep transformational experience. But for most of us, the real magic, the thing that's going to change your experience day to day in the long run, is what you do every day. And so that's kind of what your sadhana is. It's that discipline. It's the commitment. Discipline is in committing to yourself, committing to showing up for yourself. It's not about what you think you should be doing or other people telling you what you should be doing. It's about you really looking into your own heart, your own soul, getting guidance from your inner being about, at this stage in my life, what do I need to do on a regular basis in order to, and then you can fill in the blank. Are you wanting to let go of limiting beliefs? Are you wanting to, get in touch with anger because you've never felt anger before? Like whatever your personal, spiritual self-growth goal is, there's a sadhana for that. There's a spiritual practice that you can do to cultivate that. And if you're lost, we have an episode coming up where we're going to talk about those times in our life when we're just lost or feel lost. Then you can even do a sadhana with the intention of give me guidance and clarity about the next steps in my life and that kind of a thing. So I think sadhana, if you're in the Kundalini yoga world, it's specifically like white tantric or doing 2.5 hours of long cars. I feel like these longer, really intense experiences garner a lot of attention for their transformational abilities. But truly, it's what you do day in and day out, what you can make part of your routine is what will give you the most transformation and make your day in and day out life feel the most different. And that's what sadhana means generally. That's what sadhana is. It's that daily spiritual commitment. All right, so the first way the word sadhana is used in the Kundalini community is to indicate like a specific Kundalini yoga practice that you are going to commit to. I should back up. There are 3 different kind of ways the word is used, and this is the first one we're going to go through. So sadhana meaning, I'm going to do this Kundalini yoga meditation for 11 minutes every day for 40 days. That's a really common sadhana that someone would do, a 40-day sadhana. And so, again, it's just picking the right Kundalini yoga practice for you and then committing to it for a certain number of days. 40 days, 90 days, 120 days, 1,000 days are really common time frames that people will commit to. It's said that it takes 40 days to break a habit. So the idea is if you want to experience your life differently from your Kundalini yoga sadhana or get some insight, that you would do at least 40 days in order to really feel the impact of that practice in your life. And then it's said that 90 days is how long it takes to, what wording do they use? To confirm a new habit. And so 40 days to let go of an old one, 90 days to confirm a new habit. So whatever, thought, behavior, emotional pattern you're wanting to get from the Kundalini yoga practice that you've chosen, after 90 days, you kind of confirm that new habit. And then after 120 days, you really embody that new habit. And then after 1,000 days, you master that new habit, that way of thinking, that vibration, that kind of a thing. So this is why people in the Kundalini community will often commit to a 40-day practice. That's usually where someone would start, where you would pick a Kriya. Some people do a full Kriya meditation. Some people do just a meditation, and then you would commit to it to 40 days. So I'd like to share a couple of my experiences with this type of sadhana. So the first one is like your first 40-day practice. For me, the idea of doing my first 40-day practice where I did a full Kriya and meditation, 11-minute meditation every day for 40 days was so intimidating to me. In fact, I think I signed up for teacher training, if I remember correctly, because I knew in my soul that I wanted to do a 40-day practice like that, but I just did not have the discipline or the structure in my life or the willpower to sit down and do a full, 45-minute practice by myself without the support and knowledge and kind of confidence that would have come with teacher training. So that was actually a really big part of me signing up, was knowing that a 40-day practice. So through the whole 9 months that you're in teacher training, you are required to complete, I think it's at least one full 40-day practice. So you have, 4 or 5 opportunities, I think, maybe even more. If it's 9 months, you probably have about 7 opportunities because the whole class does is assigned a specific Kriya and meditation for the first 40 days. And then the next 40 days is the next Kriya and meditation. And then the next 40 days is the next Kriya and meditation. And some people are able to just get the first, Kriya and meditation that is given. They're able to just finish it and have that criteria done. But most people struggle. Most people, when they go out of town, they get sick. You just get overwhelmed. And so you skip a day. And for the purposes of teacher training, right, for the purposes of becoming a Kundalini yoga teacher, it is really important that you finish at least one 40-day sadhana. like, and this is like a whole other thing, but becoming a teacher, a Kundalini yoga teacher, without having your own Kundalini yoga practice, it creates teachers who are really out of alignment. And you can kind of tell, or at least I think you can tell, when I've gone to classes and the teacher isn't currently doing a practice. And now I'm not saying you have to do a full, 45-minute practice every day, the entire time you're teaching. But if you're really sensitive to other people's energies, you can kind of tell when a teacher isn't up with their own practice. Because the sadhana practice really helps you as a teacher with your projection and with your vibration, and you can hold space in a way that you can't if your practice isn't as robust. But that's kind of besides the point. So I joined teacher training because I knew I wanted to do a 40-day practice, and I didn't think I could practice on my own, for 40 days without it. And I was really, really intimidated by the idea of doing like a whole yoga class every day. And it turns out once you learn more about kind of the guidelines when you're in teacher training for doing a sadhana, that you can adjust some of the times so it doesn't have to take a really long time, a full hour and a half like it can if you do the full times for the Kriya. You can adjust the time so that it's a shorter experience. However, you do keep the meditation, when you're in teacher training, you keep the meditation to 11 minutes. So the first time I did a 40-day sadhana was in teacher training. I believe it was like the second round of Kriya and meditations that I was able to complete doing 40 days. And I got to tell you, it was a roller coaster. Like the first 10 days, I was like, oh, this is great. I got this. I feel so good. Like I've never felt so vibrant and connected and alive. And my sense of well-being was like through the roof. And this is going to be so easy. And then 20 days comes along and I'm like, oh, this is awesome. And then for me, it's like between that 25 and 35 days, it was like the last thing I wanted to do was my sadhana. I found myself procrastinating it, like pushing it till the end of the day. And so it would be like 9 o'clock at night. And I'm like, oh, I got to do this thing. And really just dragging myself to my mat and dragging myself through it. And then it was the last couple of days where, as for me, it was like coming on those last couple of days, day 39 and 40, where I just could look back and see how different I felt about my life and how different my perspective was and my mindset was, even though nothing about my life had concretely changed. You know what I mean? Like nothing outside of myself had changed. Everything within myself had changed. And so that was my first 40-day sadhana. And I think during teacher training, maybe I completed one more, but I did a lot where I did like 38 of the 40 days. So I practiced a lot, but wasn't necessarily like every single day doing the Kriya and meditation. So if you're in teacher training, there's very specific requirements for you for your 40-day sadhana. But most of you aren't doing Kundalini teacher training. And so this type of sadhana can be more soul-led. So as I was describing that experience, your soul might say, "Ooh, I really need that," right? Like I need to do a Kriya and meditation and really like devote this time to this part of my practice. And listen to that. I mean, let that guide you. It's a really cool experience. But your soul might be saying like you need something else at this time and place. I got to tell you, I wish I could do a 40-day sadhana and I probably need it right now. But Sophia still wakes up 3 times a night. And so in order for me to get sleep and like get everything done, like I just don't have, an hour every day without a toddler to be able to do a full practice like that. So I'll talk in another version of sadhana about what I'm doing now. But I just want to validate for you that if you feel pressure to do a formal sadhana of like, oh, I should be doing a Kriya or a meditation or any spiritual practice every single day, but you're not in a stage in your life where that's realistic, you got to cut yourself some slack and give yourself some grace and find what is going to be realistic, because the goal isn't to set yourself up for failure. However, if you have older kids, or if you're at a place in your life where you can commit to a daily Kundalini yoga practice, that I find is the most powerful way to create a transformation within yourself. And so I'll give you one other example. So with sadhana being a Kundalini yoga practice, I don't know where I got this, but it must have been a few years ago that I just felt this pull to do 1,000-day meditation. And I knew a couple people who had done it, and it had been floating around. People do 1,000-day meditations. And I honestly think at first my ego was drawn to it, because my ego wanted to have that accomplishment and kind of check that box and be like, I did it. But as time went on, and this is before I actually started the meditations, as time went on, then the pull felt more heart-led and more soul-led, and more like this is the next stage for you. Because I had done several 40-day sadhanas that were Kriya and meditation, or even like 120-day meditation sadhanas. And so I really felt that this for me was the next step. And so if you're listening to this and the idea of doing a meditation every day for 1,000 days is like appalling to you, then you don't have to do it. It's not for you. Like, this isn't a required part of Kundalini yoga practice. It's just a practice that's available to you if you feel called to it, like I did. And so I started my 1,000-day sadhana. I can't even remember why or when I started, to be honest, but I did the miracle mantra, which is, you chant Guru Guru Wahe Guru Guru Ram Das Guru 5 times on one breath, and then you take a breath. It's actually a really fun meditation. So it sounds like this: Guru Guru Wahe Guru Guru Ram Das Guru 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 Wahe Guru Guru Ram Das Guru. And then you just keep going. And it's the miracle mantra, and it kind of opens you up to the miracles of life. And so I did that meditation, and I started it with the intention of doing 1,000 days. And so I downloaded my little habit tracker and got started. And within the first week, it didn't even take that long. Within the first week, I was like, oh no, like I was feeling so much resistance, and like almost to the point of feeling nauseous. Like, this is how strong my resistance to this was. I should say here that specifically for sadhanas around Kundalini yoga, or other sadhanas where your ego knows some sort of change is likely to come, you will have resistance, because even our egos resist change, even positive change. Because there's a fear of the unknown. There's a fear that you're going to be unsafe in some way, like emotionally or spiritually or physically. So for this 1,000-day sadhana, the resistance kicked in so fast, and it was so strong that I almost felt nauseous while I was meditating. And I was going to quit. Like, I really wanted to just quit, but I couldn't. Like, I hadn't even gotten anywhere. I hadn't even gotten as far as I had done other, like, much longer practices. And so what I told myself, so that I could just keep at it, was that for the first 250 days, I would do at least 3 minutes. And so I cut the time down so that my ego like had nothing, like I couldn't resist 3 minutes, right? Like I couldn't tell myself I was too tired or didn't have enough time to do 3 minutes. By the time you tune in, meditate, and do, a Satnam at the end, it's maybe 5 or 7 minutes to do that whole thing. And then I told myself after 250 days, then I would say my minimum was 7 minutes. And so this isn't to say that I did 3 minutes or 7 minutes for those full times, because ideally you would do 11 or 21 minutes, like a little bit longer. But this was just what I had to do. Like I had to be really honest about my level of resistance and how strongly my mind was working against me completing these 1,000 days. And I really had to compromise and to go and kind of be realistic about what I needed to do in order to make it happen. And so for me, the best thing I could do was reduce the time so that my resistance decreased and I could just benefit from the consistency. Instead of doing longer meditations, I was really benefiting from the consistency. And so I did it that way. And once I got to, 500 days, I think I tried to do 11 minutes every day, but I still did 7 minutes some days. Anyway, so that's kind of like a roundabout way of just talking about two of my experiences with this type of sadhana, where you pick a Kundalini yoga practice and meditation and you do it for a set period of time. And now traditionally you would do it every single day. And if you missed a day, like say I wanted to do a 40-day sadhana, if you miss a day, which is totally fine, it happens to all of us, you would start over counting your days. But if you do it that way, or if you just say for these 40 days, this is the practice I'm doing, and if you miss a day, you just move on with your life, that's also valid. It kind of depends on what the purpose of the sadhana is for you, and if you're really trying to cultivate discipline. But there is something about discipline and committing to yourself, and I think that's the way to look at these sadhanas. It's not something you're imposing on yourself. It's not something you're saying, I should do this. It's something that your soul feels called to do. And so you commit to doing it. And so you do it on days even when you don't feel like it, because you want to commit to elevating your soul and your life experience beyond where it is right now. Right? That feels different than feeling like this is something I have to do. Now, I guess you might be curious, like after 1,000 days, how I felt after the meditation. And I have to be honest, there was no amazing revelation. There was I've had some pretty intense spiritual experiences with Kundalini yoga, but I didn't have any as a result of that 1,000-day meditation. But looking back, I think, and I mentioned this before, once I got pregnant. So I finished that meditation, the 1,000 days, right before I got pregnant. I can't remember if it was my first pregnancy, because I had a miscarriage. So I had two pregnancies kind of back to back. But regardless, it was before I was in the throes of pregnancy and feeling terrible. And before I had my daughter, I finished the 1,000 days. And when I finished, I felt honestly I was very proud of myself and thought it was a cool accomplishment, but there wasn't any single thing I could point to that was oh, this was the miraculous outcome of this 1,000-day meditation. But since then, looking back, the couple of years since I finished that 1,000-day meditation, I haven't been able to practice consistently because I had a really difficult pregnancy. And then, like I said, I had a miscarriage and then had a newborn. And Sophia has never been a good sleeper, and she nursed 20 times a day. There just wasn't a way for me to sit down and have a dedicated practice. And so I think why I felt called to do those 1,000 days at the time that I did is because it has carried me through the following couple of years. Where my spiritual practice has become more etheric and less of a discipline. It's become more of a way of being and something I tap into in my day-to-day life. And it's just now that Sophia is 19 months that I'm starting to do a dedicated practice again. But I really think the timing of things was that 1,000-day practice was kind of really bolstering my connection to self, my connection to spirit, and getting me ready for pregnancy, becoming a mother. And for this time where my practice couldn't be as traditional or kind of obvious. And I say obvious because it's you sit down on a mat and you do a practice. That's obvious. But if I'm rocking my daughter and I'm chanting Sare Sasa, that's a little bit less of an obvious practice. All right, so that is one type of sadhana. And I would say like the most common way people use sadhana, especially when they say my sadhana, that's what they're talking about. It's like a Kundalini yoga practice that they've chosen to commit to for a certain period of time. And before I move on to the other two, which will be kind of much quicker, I should want to share that we have a 40-day sadhana that's available to join. You can join anytime. And it gives you everything you need to complete your first 40-day sadhana in this way of talking about a sadhana, like a Kundalini yoga, Kriya, and meditation. So we give you like a video, we give you written instruction so that you don't have to follow a video every day, and kind of guide you through how to choose what practice you want to do, or how to modify the practices to fit your lifestyle, I should say. And then we send you like a weekly or bi-weekly email to kind of give you some support. So I'll share a little more about that at the end of the episode. And so if you feel called to doing a 40-day sadhana, we have a fully supported experience for you. So I'll put a link in the description of this episode to that, to an information page about that 40-day sadhana. All right, so moving on to the other two ways sadhana is used really regularly in the Kundalini yoga world, refers to a specific sadhana called the Aquarian sadhana. So if a yoga studio is hosting sadhana in the morning, I'll just back up. So the Aquarian sadhana is a 2.5-hour practice. And this was kind of what Yogi Bhajan prescribed us to get through these really crazy times. So he developed a very specific sadhana that we can practice as Kundalini yoga practitioners. And it's recommended to do it the 2.5 hours before the sun rises. So it'll often start at 4:30 or 5 in the morning. And it's a prescribed kind of practice. And so you listen to, it's about a 20-minute meditation or prayer called Japji. And so when you go to one of these sadhanas, everyone will be sitting there and kind of in a meditative posture, listening to a recording of Japji. And some people will have, it's long and I think it's in Gurmukhi or Sanskrit. And so some people will be looking at, a written out version and kind of they're learning how to say it. But it's a 22-minute recording. So it's a lot to learn. So that's the first thing, is listening to Japji. And then next there will be a guide there, a sadhana leader who will lead you through tuning in and a kriya and relaxation. And when a leader leads an Aquarian sadhana, it's a little different than going to a class because it's early. They're meant to be a guide more than a teacher. So they will do the practice with you because this is also their spiritual practice. And they won't give you as many instructions as like a teacher would in a class. And so it's often best to go to a few classes so you can learn, breath of fire, how to tune in, kind of learn the basics. And before you go to one of these morning sadhanas, because there's just less instruction. The intention behind that is so that everyone's kind of more in their bodies, in their connection to spirit, soaking up that really early morning, beautiful energy while they do their practice. And so you listen to Japji, you tune in, do your kriya, relaxation, and then some studios will include a meditation, and it's usually whatever meditation their teacher trainers are doing. Teacher training students are doing at that period, so that if a student comes to sadhana, they don't have to then go home and also meditate. So a lot of times there will be a meditation kind of added. And then after the meditation, there's 62 minutes of chanting. And that's really the crux of this Aquarian sadhana and what differentiates it from a normal class or the other way we use the word sadhana of like doing a kriya and meditation every day. The Aquarian sadhana is doing the Japji, doing, a warm-up, a kriya meditation, and then sitting and doing these 62 minutes of chanting. And the 62 minutes isn't the same thing over and over again. There's 7 different mantras that we do. I think most of them are 7 minutes, but one of them is 21 minutes. So Waheguru Wahegio is 21 minutes. And that's where I usually fall asleep because I don't know, that one gets in my brain and I usually just doze off. But anyways, that's besides the point. So this Aquarian sadhana is a very specific prescription that Yogi Bhajan gave for these times. And so if you're needing something really deep, like a deep transformation, or if you are feeling like you need to be held, like spiritually, emotionally held as you do your practice, then I would find a studio near you that has this morning sadhana. It's a very nurturing, it just feels like a hug around you, like this spiritual vibration. Like the vibration of this practice is really powerful. I'm really having a hard time putting it into words. But if you go into a place like a studio or a home where the Aquarian sadhana has been practiced regularly, you can feel the light in the room. You can feel the levity of energy. You can feel, it just feels so amazing. And so as difficult as it might be mentally to get over the mental hurdles to wake up really early and get to a yoga studio and to spend your first 2.5 hours of the day. And some studios compress it, I think, into 2 hours. Doing this practice, if you seek a deep transformation, or if you're going through something incredibly difficult, this might be what will hold you through it. And so, especially because there's usually a guide, like another teacher guiding you, the only thing you really have to do is get yourself up and get yourself there. And then there's a beautiful soul who is there to hold space for you and to guide you through it. So you don't really have to think much about, the Kriya or a meditation or what do I do now, or playing music or setting timers. Like, you don't have to do all of that stuff. Now, I know for me, the studios that used to host an Aquarian sadhana in the morning near me, and then there was one in LA, which isn't near me, but I would go there every now and then. They've both closed, so I actually don't know where I could practice in person, but there are a few online communities that do like a free Aquarian sadhana in the morning. And so you could search for that. And specifically, you can tell that it's the Aquarian sadhana because it'll be, 2 or 2.5 hours, and it'll start, at 4 or 4:30 in the morning. I'm forgetting. I think 4:30. We used to do 4:30 to 7. Some studios do earlier, like 4 to 6:30. So this is something that, I've led sadhana once a week for a period of time. Ramtin led sadhana I forget what day he did, like Mondays, every week for years. So he was the one at the studio leading people through it. And it was truly transformational for him, particularly if you're a teacher to lead sadhana. That's a really sacred practice. It's a really sacred thing to do. Because not only are you committing to your own practice, like you do the sadhana, but you are facilitating other people's sadhana. And there's something to be said, I think one of the coolest things about Kundalini yoga, especially if you do one of our courses or if you take teacher training, is that you can do it on your own at home. Like, that's a really empowering thing, I think, to not access spirituality through and now I'm going to confound religion a little bit in with yoga. And I just want to be very clear that Kundalini yoga is not religion. You are not required to believe anything. It's a series of practices that you do. But for most of us, it cultivates a connection to spirit, which is similar to what people go to church for. So that's why I'm making this comparison now. But with a lot of religions, you are using something else to connect to spirit or to God. You're using the Bible or a pastor or a congregation, kind of a thing. And so to be able to have your practice at home and to be able to cultivate a connection to spirit on your own and kind of be the cultivator of that, I can't think of a better word for it, is really empowering. But there is something about doing an Aquarian sadhana with a group of people, and right, it's 62 minutes of chanting. And so your voices become one. And like over the course of the 62 minutes, like as a group, you get louder and more powerful, and then more calm and introspective. And then some people lay down and sleep. And then, you become the group consciousness really melds, and it actually like exponentially intensifies your spiritual experience. So it's almost like, if you're there, if you chant with one other person, it's not like twice as deep or powerful of a meditation. It's like 4 times as powerful. And then if you got 6 people in the room, it's like 100 times more powerful of a meditation. There's a group consciousness that really cultivates the spiritual experience. So as much as I love in Kundalini yoga that we can practice on our own at home, once you have some experience and some support, I don't think that takes the place of community chanting. And one of the best ways to experience that community chanting or group consciousness that comes with chanting and using your voices together is in these morning Aquarian sadhanas. Whoa, who knew there was so much to say about sadhana? I thought this was going to be a shorter episode, but we'll wrap it up with the last way that sadhana is used. And this is more informal, but I like to make sure everyone knows that this is an option. And that's just sadhana can also just mean your daily spiritual practice. So maybe you don't do the same thing every day, or maybe you have 4 or 5 things that help you feel connected to spirit, and you do them as you're able to. And so this is kind of where my practice has been the past couple years, through both pregnancies and then having a newborn, is connecting to spirit through singing to my daughter, through going for walks at the beach and feeling my connection there, through doing long, deep breathing before I go to sleep, listening to mantras in the car. And so finding ways in my current lifestyle to find that connection and elevate my spirit in a way that kind of fits in. So being aware of sadhana, I should say, like, this version of sadhana, I would say, is cultivating your connection to spirit on a daily basis, and that being the focus rather than the focus being on a specific practice. I also learned recently in the past couple months that a lot of teachers, like when you become a mother, that your child is your sadhana, or can be considered your sadhana for the first 7 years. Kind of becoming a mother and fulfilling that role really opens you up spiritually. It opens up your intuition. It opens up your energy and your emotions in a way that, like, I've never cried so much. And it's happy crying as much as sad crying. Like, there's just an openness and a vulnerability and a spiritual connection and growth and intuition that comes with becoming a mother. And that is a form of sadhana, right? That's a spiritual practice, is stepping into this role and being, as mothers, we are the home to a child, an infant. And so being that for someone else, being of service to this brand new soul to this planet, is a form of sadhana. And I think that idea doesn't only relate to mothers. So I think any stage you're going through, if it doesn't seem practical or realistic, or you don't feel called to do a sadhana like the other two, like committing to a Kriya meditation or finding a studio and experiencing the Aquarian sadhana, looking at what in your life does cultivate your spirituality, what in your life does help you feel connected to spirit, what is that personal, spiritual, emotional growth, and really leaning into that. The one caveat I would give to this is that I think that what you need depends a lot on where you're at in your spiritual journey, particularly with Kundalini yoga. And so if you've never done a 40-day sadhana before, or you've never gone to an Aquarian sadhana, and you can do those things, then you should probably, I don't want to say should, then starting there will probably get you the most transformation. And at least from my experience, I've had experience with those types of sadhanas, and I've experienced the growth and the pranic energy has been opened in me, and my intuition has been deepened. And so I've benefited from all these sadhanas I've done in the past. And so I think there's a certain level of mastery that I can take into using, singing my daughter a lullaby as a sadhana, because I can pretty easily shift into that energy of connection, whereas I used to have to work pretty hard to cultivate it. And so I'll just speak for myself, and you can see if that relates for you. But I would be honest with yourself if you're leaning towards this type of sadhana, if you have the kind of spiritual experience and maturity to have your sadhana be so subtle, because it's harder, and I really look forward to the stage in my life where I can have a concrete practice. Like I'm telling you, the day Sophia starts sleeping through the night, that is the first thing that is coming back on a daily basis, is some sort of regular Kundalini yoga practice, because the benefits in my life are so massive. And I practice now when I can, there are some nights after I put her to bed that I have the energy to do a practice. But sometimes I just have to go to sleep right after she goes to sleep. But as soon as she's sleeping through the night, I will carve out, 45 minutes or an hour most days and do my yoga practice. I miss it that much. So if you're leaning towards this more subtle type of sadhana for yourself right now, really do a self-assessment of, are you trying to avoid the commitment and the effort of the other types? And is this really what you need? Because it is a very subtle practice, and the benefits are wonderful, but they're also more subtle. And I'm talking about this type of practice, just weaving your spirituality throughout your day. The benefits and spiritual growth of becoming a mother are massive and pretty obvious. So if you're a new mother like I am, please embrace your child being your sadhana and do not add pressure to have a practice. But if you're in a different stage of your life and you're not going through a major transition. So I haven't lost a parent yet, but I imagine that something like grief like that would also be an amazing spiritual teacher. And now I think that when I go through that, I'll be called to do an Aquarian sadhana. That's the type of experience I think I will want, those 2.5 hours, and someone else to hold space for me. I think that that's what I'll want once I go through that process of losing a parent. But I'm not sure. I haven't been there yet. So other major life transitions, changing where you work, divorces, loss of people, those are also times where we often have a lot of spiritual growth. And so if you're going through a transition like that, then it might be a good time to have a structured practice like the first two types of sadhana, or it might be a good time to have a more subtle sadhana where you're journaling or maybe connecting with your loved one who's passed, finding ways to connect with your angels or things like that. All right. I think that's all I have to say at this moment on the topic of sadhana. I had no idea that I had so much to share. But let's transition into our pranayam for today. So like I said, this is a pranayam meditation to help boost your energy and to release stress. And so let's just start by sitting up nice and tall, opening the heart, rolling the shoulders up, back, and down. Chin gently tucked down and back so you feel an expansion in the back of your neck. You're going to close your eyes and focus on your breath. So let's take a couple of deep breaths together before we start the pranayam. Inhaling deeply through the nose. Exhaling through the mouth, making a sigh. Inhaling through the nose. And then exhaling completely. On the next inhale, you're going to inhale in 8 separate segments. So inhaling in 8 sniffs. And then you're going to exhale through the nose in 1 deep, powerful exhale. Inhale 8. Exhale 1 deep, powerful stroke. Continue breathing in this pattern, your eyes closed, focused at the third eye. Inhaling 8. Exhaling 1 powerful breath. Now the 8 strokes have a pause in between them. It's not just 8 counts. So it's like 8 separate sniffs that together make 1 full, big, complete inhale. So with each sniff, you should feel your abdomen expanding, your body expanding. You're really filling with air. And then the exhale is a powerful exhale through the nose. Do one more round. Exhale completely. Okay, listen carefully. Inhale deeply. Suspend your breath. Exhale. Inhale deeply. Suspend your breath and roll your shoulders up, back, and down while you hold your breath. Exhale. We have one more. Inhale deeply. Suspend the breath and roll your shoulders as fast as you can. Up, back, and down, rolling them quickly. The breath is still suspended. Okay, exhale. Relax your shoulders, relax your jaw. Sit up tall but relaxed. Let your breath return to its natural state. Checking in with your mental, emotional, and spiritual state and seeing what the impact of this meditation was for you. Stay relaxed. I'll share a quote about this meditation. The 8 strokes will make you watch and count the breath, and that will force you to relate to your breath. The best procedure is that you do this exercise every evening. 11 minutes a day of 8-stroke breathing can give you enough energy to balance your daily consumption of pranic life, or life force or energy, and take you out of stress. Is it possible? And do you have 11 minutes? Blink open your eyes. I just found this quote so fitting for the topic of sadhana. And this is really the question to ask ourselves. And I'm even now asking myself, if we know these practices work, we know they improve your life. And so how can you not spend 11 minutes or 15 minutes doing one of these meditations every day? The benefits for the other, 23 hours in 40 minutes of your life. Let's say it takes 20 minutes because you got to sit down and do the meditation. So you do 20 minutes, you dedicate 20 minutes a day to completing a meditation, and it's going to make the entire other 23 hours and 40 minutes of your life better. How can you not spend that time? Like, how can you justify that not being worth the outcome? So, revolutionaries, my inspired action for you for today is to sit with your soul and pick a sadhana. Which type of sadhana do you feel you need at this moment? Which type of sadhana do you want to commit to? And if you want to do the Kundalini yoga one, but you want some support for your home practice, then check out the link in the description for this episode. And you can see about our 40-day sadhana, and we can support you with that practice. I wanted to do a 40-day sadhana, and I did a whole teacher training. I spent thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours just to have that experience. And that's why I recreated the 40-day sadhana, so that people could have that experience and have the support to have a 40-day sadhana without having to do a whole teacher training. All right, we love you so much, and Ramtin will be back in action for the next episode, and have a wonderful, wonderful week. Sadhana.